All right, here we go on this snowy Monday. Yes. Well, we're just going to start. I mean, normally you say we're going to start in just a couple moments, but folks, bringing the latest. Obviously, you know, huge win by the Patriots, but we're not going to talk about that. Not exactly our brand. Yes, huge snowstorm. We're not going to talk about that. There's Garney. No, we're going to talk about the news that is breaking and has people. It is really remarkable the number of the insults that people come out with, and we'll talk about it a little bit. I think I have pretty good perspective on this. I have a different perspective on it, perhaps. I can tell you that as someone that has here we go. Um, I've covered protests, I've covered riots. I also realize I'm only the only one locally that can even say that I have been in a war zone. And I want to touch on that a little bit. Sound is perfect. Yes. Um, and I think we'll start. And I listen, folks, like so many of you. I mean, of course it's terrible what happened with that man being shot and killed on Saturday. Of course it is. Um, and I don't think the words of Christy Nome are particularly helpful. I have a problem. I'm very glad that Tom Holman is being sent and is going to be in Minneapolis. And basically, they're going to have him take over the whole operation. And he's going to report to the president. He's going to report to President Trump. And he's not going to be reporting to Christy Nome, who I don't think she is I don't think she's the right person. Certainly not for this particular situation. But it kind of breaks down a little bit, and I want to share some of my experience. I mean, we'll start now. We're live on Facebook, we're live on X, we're live on YouTube. We are going to be joined by Justin Katz for anchorrising.com, our segment politics this week. But folks, there's several things about this. Number one, he's not a protester. There's a lot of things wrong with this scenario. And I also notice there's a lot of people that talk in theory, right? They talk in theory. They're not talking in real life, real situational type things. In theory, yes, if you're in a classroom, you can explain that that individual through the Constitution has the right to walk down the street and film these ICE agents 100%. But that's not what's going on. And the people that are approaching that are approaching this, to me, in a bubble. This isn't about concealed carry. It's not about this is not a Second Amendment. What was he doing there? What was he doing there? Why were they there? Have you seen what these people have been going through at night? And I'm talking about the federal agents. Here are some of the things I'm saying. He was executed. He wasn't executed. He was murdered. Listen, do I think that the cops that were there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of noise. You have a lot of members of law enforcement that have probably never worked together before, and you hear all the whistles and the horn honking. So it's a very contentious atmosphere. So you have agents that definitely feel under attack, with a point where everyone on the street feels like they could potentially be an enemy combatant. Because let's talk about the protesters. I've been posting to people, why does that woman have goggles on? And the people I'm posting that to, they're not answering. And I realize because they don't know why she does. I'll tell you why these people have goggles on. For the pepper spray. Why would they think they're going to be pepper sprayed? They feel they're going to be pepper sprayed because they plan on going back and forth. Now, I'll address this. And this is much of what we're hearing. He did nothing wrong. Well, he put his hand on a federal officer and he interfered. You're not supposed to be there. They were telling all of these protesters to get on the street. And these are two separate things. This business, he didn't deserve to die. When you're dealing with individuals and law enforcement that have weapons, things can go sideways. So these are both of these things can, first of all, I don't believe that's the case. He did nothing wrong. He may not like, that is not true at all. It's not that they were just hired off the street. You don't get it. A lot of ace ages, that's not true. So folks, you should not interfere. He was not. That's not peaceful protesting. Now, this girl in the goggles, I hear people say, oh, he was just going to help the woman. No, he got in front of a federal officer and put his hands on the agent. You may not like the law. That's the law. Then change the law. Now, he has a legal right to carry. He does. But you saw what happened. And as someone that has worked with police, things go to another level when there is a weapon produced at a scene. It just is. So a lot of the people that are saying these things, they're not police. They're federal agents. They have a gun and a badge. He's there. See, part of this is Governor Walz, the mayor and the governor, telling people to, and by the way, I'll allow this. So, and I'm just telling the mods. So if these people want to put these comments, she's not wrong. He did nothing wrong. That's not true. You also have to, what was he doing there? Why were these people there? It was a Saturday afternoon. It was freezing. I want you to understand the mindset of a lot of these protesters. And I have covered them. He was not murdered. The man on Monday night, a week ago on Monday night, he was murdered by the Manton Four. That man was not murdered. Folks, there's a difference of, we don't know that. Who pushed the lady down with the orange backpack? It could have been the federal agent. It could have been that agent. But she was then wrestling with the federal agent. Why was she doing that? Let me tell you about, see the woman in the goggles? Here's what they do. Okay. And part of the problem is that Governor Walz, that told them, but I want to be very clear to the mods that, listen, that's his opinion. I disagree with it, but he can put that. But Annabelle, he did nothing wrong. I don't agree with that. That's ridiculous. Now, listen, there is a limit. He's a federal agent. So I'm not going to tolerate that type of thing. Only because that's not, see, he's not. They're not. You're treating them like they are mall security. But I want to show you something. This is something that I get, that the people, they don't like it and they change the subject. But let me tell you about those protesters. And that is, they feel, this is what they're told, and it's false information. They're told that if you go, as long as you don't hit them, you can do anything. See that woman in the goggles? So they scream and they swear and they threaten they're going to kill them, and they go on and then they have whistles and they're creating chaos. See what that says? Putting your hands on a federal agent is a serious offense that falls under that federal law. This business of, well, he was going to help the woman. No, he put his arm out and put his arm on a federal agent. You may not like the law. Change the law. Change the law. These individuals, they have a false sense. See the woman in the goggles? They think it's all a game. They think it's all fun and games. Just like the woman, Renee Good. They thought it was a game. They even tell them, you're an ice warrior. What you do is you take your car and you block them in, and then you ram them, and they think it's a game. Listen, this isn't a game. This business that some of the people that are posting, listen, there are situations like this, and I hope the mods didn't get rid of her. He didn't deserve to die. Listen, there are traffic stops where then police determine there's a weapon in the car and the guy's going for the gun under the seat, ignoring commands to show hands and get out of the car. That business of he didn't deserve to die. Of course not. but he put himself in harm's way. That can't be denied. So these slogans that they put forward, put it, and they don't want to highlight this. Well, he was going to help the woman. He had no business interfering. When that woman decided to shove and get in the face of that federal agent, she increased her risk of something happening. Now, I've seen people, and we are going to start, and Justin's going to join us. But folks, there's just the people that are talking. Do you legally have the right? I'm just going to throw out some. You legally have the right to walk in a dark alley at 3 a.m. with an expensive watch and 50,000 in cash in your pocket. You absolutely have the right to do that. However, by doing that in a dangerous section of town at 3 in the morning in a dark alley alone, you have increased your own safety and risk that something could happen to you. So this isn't a matter of what you legally have to do. I've had people, I don't understand. I would think you'd back the 2A. This isn't about Second Amendment. This isn't about a Second Amendment case. If he was on the sidewalk, and by the way, that whole morning, see the woman in the goggles, right? They think it's a game. They keep going in the street. They're yelling. They're blowing whistles. They think it's a parade. When you're dealing with people with weapons, it's not a game. And I am telling you, as many of you know, it was 4 years ago this March, that I actually see that is ridiculous. His Nazi squad. I want to highlight that, how ridiculous that is. Are they shooting the people they're going to apprehend? No. Why are these people out on the street? Why are they out on the street? Why are they interfering? Why are they making noise, John Robitaille? They're not shooting the illegals. This would be so simple. Do you know Texas and Florida has huge ICE operations and the police block off the street? See, I can't believe this type of nonsense. You should be ashamed of yourself. And that's not even Nazi spelled correctly. They think it's a game. It's not a game. I want to share with you, and we are going to start live on the radio, and then we will have Justin on in a couple of minutes. Folks, and I'll repeat this again. In March of 4 years ago, I went to, there's a lot of new people. People have been asking me, I mean, it's ridiculous. Have you ever covered a protest? Have I ever covered a protest? Protests, police actions. What do I do when police say, John, we need you to back up? Do I say, I have the constitutional right to march? No. You back up. You, whatever, comply. I've had people, that guy was filming just like you. No, wrongo. I'm not screaming, you're a Nazi, you're a thug, blank you, all the obscenities. I'm not blowing a whistle, honking a horn, playing games with them. You comply. But let me just, they are stupid. Oh, thank you, Patty. I didn't know you live in Minneapolis. They are paid to protest. You know, Waltz, we need you to go out and document. We need you to go and document. What are you talking about? ICE has no authority harassing, arresting. Why are these people blocking the street? Answer some questions, John Robitaille. Here's the problem with someone like this. They don't know the answer because they just repeat what they're told. Harassing, arresting American citizens? Why are these people in the street? Why are they there? Answer that. And spell Nazis right. Let me just quickly mention, when I was in Ukraine, as I was entering Ukraine, right at the border of Poland, Media, they tell you, I'll never forget this. It was an older man they brought out. He spoke pretty good English. He said, you're entering an area of conflict. Just so you know, if anything goes wrong, we're not coming to get you. When I went in, they tell you, don't go out at night. It's a shooting gallery. When I was in Ukraine, 50% of the people who would go out on the street at night could get shot. What did I experience in Ukraine? People that had not slept, people on edge, and people with a lot of guns. and it was a different atmosphere, and you had to act accordingly. I didn't say, "I have a right to walk it." Wrong-o. Everybody's on edge. You had border patrol, you had Ukrainian army, you had Ukrainian police. There were a lot of tension and a lot of people with weapons. I didn't stay there at night. I'd go back to Poland at night. You couldn't go out at night. So the question to me is when you put yourself in a difficult situation. So we're going to start. Now, folks, we have a lot of updates about the situation with the Manton 4. And I am going to actually be doing another update. I've learned a lot more, and it's terrible. It was the 11-year-old that was actually the ringleader. And that David Morales, who's running for mayor of Providence, they won't even mention that that poor man was murdered, but that's for a posting. But DePietro.com, brought to you by the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Remember, lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. They're waiting for you at the Coesit Inn. I also want to remind you, I hope everyone's warm. So far, this is great. We haven't lost power. Now, there's a lot of ice coming. This is going to be a brutal week, because everything that snows is going to turn to ice. I want to remind you about Propane Plus. If you need fuel or propane, get it today. 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. Always online at propaneplus.com. Before we have Justin Katz, I don't know what that means, but let me just, a lot of people they're stating things, and I can tell they've never attended a protest, and they're talking about in theory. There's a huge difference in theory of what these people that have suddenly become experts on the Constitution. I have the constitutional right to march on the sidewalk. I have the constitutional right to be here. I have people that tell me that. I'm at a scene, and maybe it's a very volatile scene. And the police say, Juan, can you back up? Need you back over there. You see, they have police tape up in the media. We go behind it. I never fails. I have people. You have the constitutional right to march on that. I'm not going to be a moron about it. I'm not going to be an idiot. They have a job to do. I have a job to do. We can coexist. The summer of 2020, that was the first time I really started covering and live streaming the BLM protest in and around Providence. And one of the things that stuck out at me was for a lot of people, that was an excuse to go up and just scream at police. And that's these people. These two people, that's them in the goggles. They think it's a game. And I would witness people during the summer of 2020. And one time, it was in front of Gina Raimondo's house, actually, on the east side. And the protesters were there. And I'd never seen such disrespect. And I lived in New York. I'd never seen such a large group of people have such disrespect for police and go up. And it was like a free shot. When you see like the dunk tank, that's how they viewed it. Some of them, this was their opportunity. If they were ever wronged, if their life is not turning out the way they want, if they were ever abused or arrested, this was their free shot. That's how they viewed it. You can go up and say whatever you want to the police, and they, in their mind, and they can't do anything. And what do you think? After a period of time, tensions rise. Who wants to put up with that? Nobody. Disrupting at night. I want to make one more point before we bring on Justin. One of the problems when U.S. troops were in Iraq, and then you have somebody, it's just a villager, but then it turns out he has a bomb on him. And then he detonates, right? Or sets up a roadside bomb or plants a bomb. One of the problems that our troops, and I've interviewed a bunch of them, encountered was the problem is then every person in the village becomes a potential combatant. So it's not a matter of uniforms. It could be anybody. Yeah, it could be a guy walking along. Looks like he's just, going to the store. But then he turns around and he's got, an explosive device. That is the atmosphere in Minneapolis. Who can tell? Did he have the right to carry? Of course he did. If he stayed on the sidewalk and not interfered, then he would have gone home that night. But that's not what happened. All right, let's bring him on, even though this is the dominating story. But I am anxious to hear his thoughts. Folks, he is the managing editor of anchorrising.com. It is Justin Katz. Justin, I want to just start off. There's a lot to go with this. We're seeing a lot of we had a warm up to how people were going to react with the prior shooting. But I want to just out of the top, just hear some of your initial thoughts on this latest shooting.
Well, to build on what you were just saying, if you're just a passerby walking by ICE doing something, somebody falls, you go to help them, and the police come over and interfere. What would anybody do? They go hands up. They go, oh, I'm just trying to help. Instead, the guy's fighting back. This was entirely on him. It was a horrible act. Presumably, the best explanation I've seen is that one of the officers got the gun in that split second. Another officer heard him say gun. The gun went off by accident and he shot him. That's a tragic accident, but it was because this guy made so many decisions. He went to this protest. He carried a gun. He was in the street directing traffic, dressed as if to look like one of the ICE agents. He was interfering with whatever was happening with the woman. He pushed back against ICE. This was all his fault. It's horrible, but it's all his fault. And we have to start recognizing that. I mean, if you watch the video, I mean, it's easy to kind of watch on social media with no sound on, but if you turn on the sound, what do you hear? You hear these high-pitched, horrible whistles.
Yes.
All the way from the governor and other Democrats, including our senator and a bunch of our politicians, the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis. They're encouraging people to go out, resist, to take down license plates, to follow. There's some indication that government officials were involved in this Signal social media, encrypted social media, where they were communicating and working against them. That's all happening. They're encouraging this kind of pushback. Then you add in the whistles, you add in people jumping into the street to direct traffic when they have no business doing that. And this is what's going to happen. And you have to conclude that these politicians want it to happen. And what I find as a Rhode Islander particularly horrible is you can tell our politicians want it to come here. You've got David Morales, the representative running for mayor, saying, go out there, track ICE. If you see anything, there's terrorist organization. They're actively encouraging this kind of behavior here. And I think one of the key important points is, if this were an ICE problem, if this were a problem of immigration enforcement, you would see this happening everywhere in the country, whether or not local authorities were cooperating with ICE. That's not happening. It's happening in just a few places, and specifically the places that have said, we are not going to participate, we're not going to help. And I've been saying this for months, maybe years at this point, about sanctuary policies in Rhode Island. If you really want things, if you want influence to make sure that the enforcement goes well and there's not abused or anything like that, you want your officers involved. You want Providence police. You want state police there on the scene, helping, interacting with the federal agents and making sure nothing like this happens. They're not. Right. Instead, they're doing the opposite. And you can only conclude they want this kind of thing to happen so they get their propaganda hit.
And Justin, let's talk about this. For instance, it's not like they're shooting the people that they're going to apprehend. Those are going fine. It's these people that inject themselves. And I think there is responsibility for both the Democrat Party, their narrative, this governor, the mayor, because these people treat it like a game. That's why the people that I've been going back and forth with all weekend, I asked the simple question, why are these people wearing goggles? I'm surprised they don't know the answer. I know the answer because I've covered the protests. It's because of pepper spray. It's because they plan on getting pepper sprayed. They view it like it's a game, like that Renee Good, where her and the wife, they consider themselves, quote, ICE warriors. And you don't even have to get out of your car. And this is insanity to me. You're dealing with people with guns. I'm glad you picked up on the whistles, because that is an area of chaos. That is almost like trying to operate in a riot situation. And what we're seeing at night, it is a riot situation. Justin, let's go down the line. Why is it Morales? I'm glad you picked up on that, and Libs of TikTok have picked up on that. What I'm trying to also point out is, on the night of Martin Luther King, 4 youths, right, I'm not sure exactly where he lives, but right in Oneyville on Manton Avenue, an 11-year-old and 3 12-year-olds, they jumped a guy, 51-year-old guy from behind. They killed him. That's right in Providence. They're not even teens. Morales doesn't even mention that. instead, he puts out this video. The only way I could think of it is he's using it as a fundraising tool. They're a rogue agency. They're Nazis. They're thugs. They're murdering people. To me, it is disqualifying for him to even think about running for mayor. But why do you think the rest of the media is just ignoring him?
Ignoring Morales?
Morales.
Yeah, well, I think they think he's just doing what progressives do. I mean, to them, they don't see the problems you and I see with this. They don't see. I mean, they just think he's one of the good guys. They cannot see any other story. I mean, I've been just almost with morbid fascination. I've been retweeting a lot of what Mike Stanton, a former Providence Journal writer, and now UConn journalism professor, the things he's saying. He's completely in this Democrat bubble. It's almost like you were saying, the protesters think they're in a game. And yeah, I love that. ICE is Nazi fascists. They're out there. They're out of control. They're killing people. And yet all these people are perfectly willing to stand up and block armored vehicles. I mean, no, that's not what happens when you're afraid people are actually out to recklessly going to kill you. That's is so ludicrous. But I think we see the same thing. I don't think these journalists and I don't think other Democrats can really conceptualize what's going on here. The idea that, like, right at this point, I mean, a lot of my information's from social media and people I follow and listen to, so haven't dug into it completely. But at this point, it looks like there is an organized, well-funded operation with access to license plate databases.
Yep.
Running an operation in Minneapolis. This is 2 hours of relatively mild rioting compared to the left on January 6th was not an insurrection. This is an insurrection.
It is.
I don't think they can conceptualize it in their minds. They can't see it because that would force them to answer difficult questions. And I think it ties directly to what you were talking about with the guy who was killed in Providence. I think we almost understate it when we say that he was killed by 4 children. He was beaten to death with their hands and feet. It's not like they accidentally set a car running and it ran over him. They beat the guy to death, bludgeoned him with their fists and feet. It's unbelievable. But the reason you don't see this, and I responded to Helena Folks, who was out there talking about ICE, and I said, well, had you had any comment on this attack in Providence? She didn't respond, and she doesn't have any comment that I could find, because they don't want to go into it. They treat it like a local law enforcement story, like almost like a police log. Like 4 underage children were found drunk in Providence the other day. That's sort of the tone of how they're treating it, is because they don't want to ask or answer the questions of what does this mean? What would really have caused this? And how could we really affect this? But what really bothered me about Helena Folks not mentioning it is she's running against an incumbent. It would be to her advantage to say things are going crazy here. And the same thing for Morales. You'd think he'd say, look what's happening in the city under Mayor Smiley. Instead, he just ignores. It's because they don't want to go there. They can't conceptualize. They don't want to even think about what all this would really mean for them. And I think that's why you see, I noted recently that as far as I can tell, there's one self-identifying Democrat in the entire country, Representative Fetterman, who's willing to say, no, ICE is doing their job. These people should stop rioting. But not a single one. Is just astonishing to me. Astonishing that across the country, not a single partisan Democrat is willing to say, I think we might be going a little too far here, folks. It's just astonishing. And I think we see that in Rhode Island. And I think they are delusional. They don't think it could happen here. And I think if it were to happen, they'd think, oh, well, this is the good guys doing good things. And it's really deep in their minds. I don't think they can think about it otherwise.
I think you're right about, and from what I've seen, it's possible the lieutenant governor of Minnesota was involved with the Signal app, and they were providing information. If that's the case, Justin, she could face charges. I did note that Governor Walz suddenly has reached out to the White House, and he's now saying he wants to find a way to come to common ground. I think he's realizing just how deep this could get. I also want to just touch on, and we might as well just talk about this, but Governor McKee put out word. I'm asking everyone to stay at home. It's a bad storm. Stay at home, and the roads are dangerous. Walz could be doing that. Walz could be, you would think you'd say, hey, listen, we have this rogue agency in. So for your own safety, stay at home. But he's not doing that. He's, to me, is part of the problem with telling them to go out and document, and it's us against them, and comparing what's going on to Anne Frank. Justin, also, what I also find doesn't get any coverage is, for instance, ICE will contact the city of Cranston. They'll contact Cranston police. We have information of someone that we're looking to get, and here's the address. Cranston police coordinate with them, my understanding. block off the street, so then you don't get any traffic. ICE is able to go, and it's like in and out in just a couple of minutes, and there's no problems because the intelligence they're going off there is either the guy's there or he's not, and then they're on their way. We're seeing the difference when you suddenly have mobs of people and caravans of cars. If people were blowing whistles and screaming and descending onto the street in Cranston, well, then you'd have a completely different outcome, one of chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And we haven't seen that kind of thing in Rhode Island so far recently, especially in Cranston and Providence a little bit last time around. But that's exactly what's the image of Waltz you get? You get him talking about Anne Frank and Nazis and Hitler. You get him reaching through the bars of the gate on his mansion, telling people to go, fight and push back. And this is exactly, and it's obvious. This is what's really mind blowing, and I think really telling about what's happening with Democrats in general and in Minnesota in particular. It's obvious what you do. You say, stay home, people. We're expecting riots. The local police will be there. They will be cooperating with ICE to make sure that they can do their job and get out of here quickly so we can go back to our lives as we want to live them. That's how we adjust things. If you don't like the immigration policy, we have elections. And that's essentially what this comes down to, is Democrats don't want to respect the fact that we had an election and they lost. America wants to enforce immigration. They don't want to do that. And, it's increasingly clear, it shouldn't be lost on anybody, but that this all has happened just within weeks of huge controversy over billions of dollars of fraud.
That's right.
With some of these same politicians implicated.
Yeah.
Now suddenly we have riots. Now suddenly it's a federal law enforcement problem. It's just so obvious that at least as a potential explanation, you would think all the talking heads would be talking about it, that this would be framing every conversation, but it's not, because they're playing to type, because everybody knows what they should be doing if they were responsible. And apparently not a single Democrat other than Fetterman in the country is responsible in that
way. I also want to touch on, I see this talking point that people say, they're American citizens that are being killed. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you're standing out on the street and there's someone in a vehicle coming at you, you don't know if they're young, old, whether they speak English, whether they're from a foreign land, what the deal is. All you know is that there is the vehicle coming at you, and it did hit the guy, even though they repeatedly asked that individual, Renee Good, to stop. With that individual on Saturday, now listen, as you and I both saw, and I'm glad you mentioned the whistles, it's very chaotic. People don't understand how the temperature goes up when a weapon is produced into an environment. When someone says gun, it gets everybody on edge. So these are also probably officers, federal agents that probably haven't worked together a lot. They don't know at that moment, to me, they don't know, does he speak Spanish? Does he speak German? What is his intent in being there? All they know is it's a very volatile atmosphere. Suddenly someone has a weapon. It does sound like one removed the weapon, and then when they looked at the holster, they saw it wasn't there. So maybe they're thinking, and then he's got his phone in his hand. It's very possible that it was a mistake and they thought he had the gun in his hand. But the way it's pieced together of people, he has a First Amendment right to be on the sidewalk. He has the Second Amendment right to carry. Those things are true, but they're ignoring the atmosphere that they're in. And Justin, something else I want to point out. I am telling you right now, there is no police force that could withstand the amount of just sheer abuse and terror, and it's day after day and night after night, and the screaming and the horn honking and going after them, and they have to arrest people and blocking the street. And what people seem to be oblivious to is there's a human dynamic to it. He put himself in a very dangerous situation, and he was like, who is he to be directing traffic? Oh, he was just going to help her up. But like, dude, you have no authority there. You're a guy showing up with a gun on the sidewalk in the street.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think one thing we really can't slide is, I mean, this we talk about this as if as if the some of the more humorous comments say, "Oh yes, definitely the police should have watched it in slow motion before they made any decisions." You watch the whole thing; it's 30 seconds, a minute from start to finish when they first start wrangling with the guy to the end. You don't have time for that. Even watching videos from three angles, you're sitting there going, "Is that a gun? Is it a phone? Is it a
Yep.
shadow?" A gun went off. I've heard some suggestions that it was
Yes,
this notoriously tricky gun he had
it is.
accidentally went off.
I saw that.
You don't have a choice if you in that kind
No.
of fight. It doesn't matter what language. It doesn't matter if he's a citizen. You know, you've got a guy who's interfering with you. He's dressed specifically to look like you. He's part of this group with blown whistles to make sure you can't think straight. He's interfering with this woman. You don't know if he's attacking her or you or trying to help her. You can't make these decisions in real time, or somebody's dead. And that's what happened. He ended up dead. And it's just the commentary is so irresponsible by
It
not
is.
acknowledging all of this. And there's no, as you said, no police force could possibly do it because they're looking for propaganda. You know what it made me think of was, under the best scenario would be the guy walking across the street and happens to enter into the situation. He was helping to create the situation. It made me
Yes.
think of the 1960s. There's a famous picture of the white cop holding back the dog attacking a black child. And the story behind that is that the kid was actually just running out from a crowd into the street. Like, he didn't know what was going on. He was just running across to get somewhere. And the dog kind of like lunged at him, and the cop was pulling the dog back, trying to keep it. But that turns into this propaganda thing, to the point that we've got statues of that moment, as if the officer was sicking the dog on the kid. This is what the left does, and has done it for decades now. And when I'm among those who's just getting so frustrated. I saw John Kasich, Republican, out there, other Republicans, Jonah Goldberg, who's formerly of the National Review, big conservative intellectual. They just don't seem to get it. This is the playbook. They do it over and over again, and you can't just go, okay, well, they were really obnoxious this time, so let's just pause. You can't, because that just shows them this works. At some point, they're going to keep increasing their demands to a point we can't. The only answer they'll accept is, yes, you are now permanently in control of our entire society, or we enforce the law. And it's starting to get really frustrating to watch, even Republicans and conservatives who aren't getting that and aren't saying, let's analyze this clearly and see. We have to stand up to them. It's just, there's no choice.
When a gun enters the equation, it's just a different dynamic. As you know, we've had high profile incidents in Rhode Island. It was this time of year, actually, even the Martin Luther King situation where, well, not Martin Luther King, but Cornell Young Jr. There was a report of a fight at Fighters right at Valley and Atwell's late at night. There was a report somebody had a handgun. The police come out. There was a fight. There was someone with a handgun. But then Cornell Young Jr., who was inside, he sees what's going on. He starts running out with his gun, not in uniform, not a badge, and they shot and killed him. You had the situation where someone stole, this is just a couple of years ago, stole a police cruiser. And then the feeling was that there was a rifle in the back of the cruiser and that the guy had gotten into a truck. Well, then you have this truck barreling up Route 10 and he won't stop for police. And then he's going right for the police that are there, and they shot and killed the guy. But, when everyone's after, that was the wrong guy. That's not the guy that stole it. But these are split-second decisions, and he's ramming the truck at them. That's where I think people they try to act like it's a classroom, and you can do this, and you can do that. What you saw on Saturday, that is, I'm not going to say it was a riot, but they're running along, and the girl with the goggles, and they think like they want to tell everyone, "Hey, I just got pepper sprayed," and it's like a badge of honor to them, and they're enticing them and going up and irritating the federal agents. These people, it is a recipe for disaster. Any other thoughts, Justin? I did see Governor McKee put out, we stand with Minnesota and this other, we got to get ICE out of there. It's what's unfortunate to me about Governor McKee is everything now is just about trying to win that Democrat primary. Nothing is about leadership or what's the right thing to say for all citizens.
Oh yeah, he's just so far gone down the irresponsibility trail. There's one other detail in Minnesota I think it's important to point out is, I think it was a week ago, maybe less than a week, the rioters broke into an ICE vehicle and stole a chest that had
Yes.
paperwork and weapons in it. I mean, so this is the environment they're operating in. And I mean, to go back to McKee, just the irresponsibility for him to be still stoking this. He was supposed to be one of the more moderate ones. He was supposed to be for school choice to some degree. He was supposed to be for small businesses. So what do we get? He's now owned by the teachers union. He's supporting tax on millionaires. He's speaking right up with all the other radicals trying to import this violence and chaos to Rhode Island. It's so disappointing, and it makes it even worse that Helena Folks is not trying to get to his right. I mean,
No.
where is there no constituency in this party for anything reasonable? And I'm increasingly thinking there's not. I mean, right now the Senate president is also the president of a teachers union, and the teachers
Yep.
union, one of their most radical people, is now the head of the AFL-CIO, Patrick Crowley. These are communists, and they want this stuff to be happening so that they can have radical change. That's who's running the state. It's more and more eye-opening the more you see this, and it's just shocking to see that there's nobody. I mean,
No.
sometimes I write to Jack Reed, you used to be considered the reasonable one. Could you say something reasonable, please? Just a little bit. And when he doesn't even, I've seen him sometimes hedge on going total radical. The radicals attack him for being too modest about it. This can't go on. And I think we're seeing the effects in our government in Rhode Island, and it's only going to get worse unless people start coming up with some way to push back on it.
Folks, it's time for Katz's Corner. This is a story that Justin Katz has found. And what do you have for us this week, Justin?
Well, this is a small detail, but it plugs right into what we're talking about. There's legislation in both the Senate and the House, and it's got multiple sponsors, at least the full amount that can appear on a page, which is, I think, 5. But they're trying to repeal the ban on teachers, healthcare workers, and municipal workers striking. They're just trying to repeal it, to get rid of it. But that made me think of is in Minnesota, a lot of people are asking, how do these people have time to be protesting nonstop every day, all day? Well, a lot of them are from out of state. A lot of them are they have these jobs where they can leave. A lot of them, the schools closed down and went remote. So the schools have actually facilitated teachers and radical union people going out on the street. But that's, I think, contributes to another sign that they want this sort of chaos in Rhode Island. And it would actually be worse in Rhode Island, because if they in Minnesota, they have a right to strike, these municipal employees and school employees and healthcare employees. They have a right to strike, but it has to be related to negotiation. And they have to go through several steps. If they do this in Rhode Island, unions could strike at any time for any reason, and nobody could say anything about it. And I think that's what they want. They want us to live in fear, chaos, and disruption. It's the Democrat platform of Rhode Island at this point.
Justin, one other thought. I never thought I'd use the term white privilege, but you're right about the propaganda machine and what they pump out. And you think of the streets, and I'm going to come back to not just the nurse, the guy that was shot, but the 2 women with him, that, and kind of like that, the wife of Renee Good and so forth. But there's definitely an attitude that they're believing and saying to them, you're not really police. You can't do anything to me. They do treat them almost as if they're like a mall security cop who's off the property of the mall. So therefore it's belittling, it's condescending, but they definitely feel that they basically like, well, you're not going to shoot me. I'm an American citizen, and I have the right to protest, and I have a right to say whatever I want. And I have the right to block you and blow a whistle. There's this unreasonable power that they have, and it goes beyond unreasonable. It's a fabricated self-power that they have of, well, you're not going to do anything to me because you can. And then when boom, it's like cold water. When things come apart, I mean, I see this sometimes when I'm with police, of these people that think, I'm just going to go up and I have a right to talk to the police and I'm going to straighten this out and I'm a homeowner. And then, you saw it with that Maria Bucci with the, do you know who I am? And it's this attitude that they pull as if they're invulnerable, that they cannot be touched and that they are in command of the situation. And that is clearly not what is going on here.
It's almost like a mental pathology. I mean, even in that video, the woman that was closest to the shooting, she was backing away. They shot him. She starts going back toward them, shouting, "What did you do? What did you do?" Like it was a child who spilled some milk or something. It's a mental disorder in some of these people.
It is.
It's amazing. But I think it goes back to that attitude of, we're privileged, we're citizens, we're white, we're women, you're not allowed to touch us, we're allowed to do whatever we want. And you see this in a lot of the ones blocking the cars and getting pushed, and then they get back up and go right back to it. They're these middle-aged women. It's a pathology, I think.
It is. Justin, excellent job, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you, John. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, folks, that is Justin Katz. Again, our segment, Politics This Week. And I recognize how, we talk about, and I certainly uh, appreciate his perspective tremendously. I want to stay on schedule, folks, and just remind you, if by the way, if you have a disaster during all of this, the storm, snow, ice, a flood, remember Servpro or Providence. Hey, you saw them. We captured the video of them in East Providence with they had to evacuate that assisted living center in East Providence because they had water leaking, then they had mold. Servpro Providence, call them 401-941-5500. They're fast, they're thorough, professional. If you have a fire or you have flood, Servpro Providence. Now they got called out, apparently. I think it's Orchard Manor or something like that. Because there was water dripping from the roof, and then it was building up, and then it started to develop mold. Servpro Providence, 401-941-5500. Folks, I want to be very clear about and just say several things. Do I think, first of all, yeah, it's terrible that man lost his life. And it certainly seems there's different components to this. I don't like how Christy Nome and they immediately come out with blah blah blah, and they're saying things they can't back up. And he was there to do mass damage. You don't know any of this. He was a domestic terrorist. You don't know any of that. So I want to. It's very possible. It's very possible that the police screwed up. It is, and it looks like they may have, and they may not know each other, and they may not work together. And as Justin just said, right now we don't know exactly what happened, but it is possible the guy that removed the gun from the equation either A, didn't communicate it loudly, maybe he thought he was doing the right thing. Well, we don't know what they were yelling to each other. Maybe someone said, remove his weapon. So did everyone know the weapon had been removed? And in a split second, you're just wrestling and hearing gun. And he definitely had, I think, it holstered. So someone looks and there's no weapon in the holster. And then the guy has his phone in his hand. So like several things. Of course, he didn't deserve to die. Of course not. Do you think they wanted to deal with that? Do you think they wanted to be on the street dealing with these people that continue every single day, and they're demonstrating and protesting and the whistleblowing and the horn honking and the destruction? And it is true what Justin said. He's exactly right. They broke into their cars. They were stealing documents. They stole weapons. That atmosphere is very toxic, and it is a powder keg. So, but it's very possible. I'm not. I'm not mimicking and reporting the line. I'm not doing that. And it's very possible. But I come back to kind of what Justin and I what were they doing there? And some of the things I hear from people, well, he was directing traffic. He had no authority to be directing traffic. The police wanted them out of the street. The police wanted the street open. Where were they? In the street. They kept telling them, get onto the sidewalk. I did see what was said when the agent pushed that girl down. I don't know what was said. See her down, and if you see the video, and I'll admit, if you're not watching the videos, then a lot of the things we talk about and I post, you're not gonna. I don't. If you haven't seen the videos, this isn't the place for you. We're like a level above. I like to do where everyone has seen the information, and then we can talk and discuss and post on it. But I don't know what was said. That agent definitely needs to be, and if they haven't already, what happened that agent felt inclined to shove her out of the way? What was she saying? I am sure, and I've seen and read that they were trying to keep the street open. So these people saying, well, they didn't have a right and they're not police. These people are almost implying that the nurse, he has the right to direct traffic. He has the right to stand in the street. But the federal agent doesn't have the right to stand in the street. And Justin is right. That guy was wearing a coat, and he does look like he like an ICE agent the way he's dressed. And he is facing him, and I can see that he's filming. But what you don't understand is a big part of this equation for those that are watching is this person right here with the goggles, with the heavy winter coat, the Gore-Tex that George Costanza wore. She thinks it's a game. She thinks I'm going to get pepper sprayed. We can go up. We can yell whatever we want. We can swear. We can block them. Then you say, I didn't touch you. And we're filming. They're acting like it's a game of cat and mouse. It wasn't a game of cat and mouse. How many times did they have to tell this individual to get out of the street and get on the sidewalk? And what do? They keep going. And I want to be very clear. That doesn't mean they're justified to kill the guy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the consequences of leading up to that. People go to so you're saying he was right? No, it shouldn't have happened. It is an element of like fog of war. Watch the video. I'm so glad he mentioned the whistles. Here's the law that a lot of people don't like. So when that agent knocked that girl down or woman down, whatever, people don't like that. All right, well then take it up. She was filming it. She could have then filed a complaint. I was going along. This federal agent pushed me to the ground. And I don't know what was said. I don't know what led up to that. But he injected himself there, this nurse. He did. And he put his hand on a federal officer. Putting your hand on a federal agent falls under federal law. And there it is. You may not like the law, then change the law. But interfering with a federal officer in the midst of that, well, you may not like it. It's a felony. It is a felony. He had no business doing that. He should have been on the sidewalk. If he was in charge, then he should have corralled them to the sidewalk. This wouldn't have happened if they were on the sidewalk. They're not on the sidewalk. So he had no business. Well, he was directing traffic. He doesn't have the right to direct traffic. He's not a traffic cop. These people, they're not really police. They're federal agents. They have badges and a gun. No, they're not the same as Minneapolis police. It is different. I get that. But people are believing this propaganda and treating them like you have no power here. You can't do a thing. That's what he's saying. You're worthless. You're scum. Leave Minneapolis. You have no right to be here. Well, they did have a right to be there. Now, listen, I agree. This whole situation I don't know how else to explain it. It's a dangerous atmosphere. You have the situation. We saw a situation in Providence this past summer. There's a late night party. The police are called. And suddenly, somebody starts getting into a beef with the police. And then someone injects themselves. And they get between the person and the police. And they start pushing the police saying, he's okay. And then you see the police saying, put your hands down. And the person seems to think, oh no, I can do this. This is my house, back up. And then you see the police stop and say, I'm going to tell you one more time, stop, push it. I've seen it happen. They have this false sense of security, or in many cases, like white privilege. These people, they think this is where it's very dangerous propaganda that they're being fed. And I think a lot of this comes from the governor, actually. I can't believe how irresponsible this guy is. The only saving grace about this is what would have happened if he, in fact, had become the vice president. So this is not, and folks, listen, Minnesota is part of the United States. I wasn't born, but there was a situation in the 60s where you had a governor in the South who was saying, I don't care how many federal agents you send in here. We're not sending blacks and not going to our schools. So, and what were those people saying? Get these feds out of here. Get them out of here. We don't want blacks in our schools. Get these feds out of here. There's a movie on it, kind of, with Mississippi Burning, which is fantastic. It's not exactly on that, but you, Minnesota, they're not an island. They have to follow the rules like everybody else, whether they like it or not. They don't just get to announce. See, that's the problem. Because believe me, I mean, if we're up to me, what are they doing there? I think the administration should pull these people out of here. I do. It's look what the damage done the month of January between the two shootings in Minneapolis. It started with the Nick Shirley videos over the weekend after Christmas, and then we start learning about all the Somali fraud. Because of the Somali fraud, they start sending all the federal agents in. Because they're sending the federal agents in, you have people like Waltz and Fry saying, get out of our city. And then it becomes a contest. And I fully get that if you're the president and you want to lose to Waltz. Like, I fully get that whole attitude. But I'm very glad. Here's some good news. Tom Homan is now going to be in charge of Minneapolis. And I do believe they need to de-escalate the situation, because what they're dealing with now is this is not happening as they're trying to undergo removing people that shouldn't be there. It's not about that. The problems are these people. The problems are people that think that it's perfectly okay to show up. And I get that he's a legal gun owner. I'm not even disputing that. I've had people, this is a Second Amendment. It's not a matter of that. And by the way, if you do have a concealed carry, and I know firsthand, when you get the proper paperwork for that, when they pull you over, and anyone who is a legal gun owner, especially concealed carry, one of the first things you do if you get pulled over is you instruct the police that you have a weapon in your vehicle, and you do it to keep the officer safe and you safe. But that is the first thing you do. Now, in Rhode Island, you have an obligation to do it. In Minnesota, in Minnesota, I don't think you have to say anything unless you're asked. Now, we don't know. Did they say to him, do you have a weapon? Did he say yes? I think Justin is right. Supposedly the weapon this guy had was prone to misfire. So it's very possible that when one officer removed the weapon, it misfired. The other officer, in a split second, see he doesn't have it in his holster and he's got something in his hand. And they tragically, mistakenly shot him thinking that he had pulled his weapon. It's very possible that that had happened. There was a case in New York, Amadou Diallo. I remember this. Maybe some people don't. Now, this was terrible. He was from, he lived in the Bronx. Amadou Diallo, I forget where. He was, an illegal immigrant, whatever. But somehow he fit the description of someone that had pulled an armed robbery in the Bronx. So the police in the Bronx, I think it was a taxi driver, called it in and said, there's a guy that fits that description right now. So the police go to where Amadou Diallo lived, and it's dark. He was, from what I remember, he was like below them, and there's 5 of them, and it's dark. And he reaches in, and he's pulling out I think it was a wallet. And one of the officers panicked. Now, there's a language barrier with Amadou Diallo. So he's reaching to get his wallet, but it's dark. And one of the officers panics and fires. The bullet ricochets and hits one of the other officers. They think he's reached for a weapon and fired. So then they open fire. So then it's 41 shots. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it. And it was really just a wallet. There's a lot of things at play. I want to be very clear. Listen, the cops in that situation completely screwed up. They did. Listen, in any occupation, people make mistakes. Doctors make mistakes. Teachers make mistakes. Firefighters can make mistakes. Anything. Soldiers can make mistakes. In war, whether it was the Vietnam War or the Korean War, huge amount of fatalities were friendly fire. Huge problem. Huge number, as a matter of fact. When you enter firearms into an equation, a lot of things can go wrong. So these people that are now he's a martyr, right? Now he's a martyr. Now they want to honor him, say his name, Renee Good, Daniel Petty, and so forth. I just I come back to what were they accomplishing by being there? Why were they on the street? Why was it so important to harass those agents? Because they have the constitutional right, and the governor told them to document, and blah blah blah. That whole you are literally playing with fire. And I also people, he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't touch them. He was just trying to help her up. He was directing traffic. He had a legal right to carry. He was just a helper. He was trying to help her. He was directing traffic. He was just filming. I have no idea. It's terrible. I'm not going to defend the actions of the officer. I'm not defending it. I'm not even saying it's justified. Things are going to go when you have a situation like that is so volatile and hostile. You're going to have these types of outcomes, as terrible as it is. Folks, I want to remind you about Capital Fence. Hey, keep yourself safe and your family safe. Capital Fence, 401 618 4407. 401 618 4407. Call owner Mike Rizzo at Capital Fence, whether it's a fence or a gate, the most trusted for privacy and security, serving Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Now, you can find them on social media, but call them 401 618 4407. Residential commercial owner Mike Rizzo. Riz at capitalfenceRI.com, serving Rhode Island and Mass, repair and maintenance, highest quality, durable, free estimate, and they're licensed and insured. Capital Fence, 401 618 4407. I also want to mention maybe it's an emergency, you need a plumber. Call J&B Plumbing, 401 743 9153. 401 743 9153. J&B Plumbing. They repair damaged water pipes. They can repair clogged pipelines. They replace water heaters. J&B Plumbing. 401 743 9153. So I want to mention that maybe some of you haven't followed it, but the summer of 2020, that's how I really launched the live streaming, and it was the BLM protest. And you learn a lot by doing it. And towards the end, it was ugly. And I have been in the middle of it was a riot. It was a riot, and it was frightening. And I'm telling you, I'm not going through that again. It's very unnerving. There was nothing healthy about that. It was when we would be on the street, and this is when they're all wearing masks, and it's nighttime, and there's 200 and 250, and they're chanting and yelling, and they're coming at you. It's terrifying. It is. It's terrifying. Never mind, they start throwing things. I was there one time with security person I was with. They would bring the Black Lives Matter Antifa protesters. They would bring frozen water bottles. You take a bunch of Poland Spring, put them in the freezer. When you bring those, and then they throw them, it's like a brick. One of the guys said, "Yeah, I'll walk with you." He ended up at Rhode Island Hospital. One of the water bottles came crashing, cut, his head gave him a gash right above his eye. Near the end, we had to wear helmets. So there was another person, he said, and he was former military police. "Yeah, I'll walk with you." I said, "All right, just so you know, we wear helmets." He's like, "I don't need a helmet." Well, one of the Black Lives Matter protesters went to a dollar store, I think on Cranston Street, and bought a bunch of Campbell's soup. They were like tomato soup. It's like 25 cents or something like that. They bring them in a bag. And what do you think they start? They start throwing them. So the guy that I was with, I said, we wear helmets. One of them hit my helmet, bounced off. It cracked the helmet, but protected me. But it caught him right in the head. He got his head split open. I had one of the Antifa protesters. She had a Pitney laser, and she aimed it. It was right near the end of the night. And just as I had turned, I don't know, 20 feet away, you can light a match with one of these things from like 30 feet away. And so she was trying to aim for the police, so she hit my right eye. I had to go to the eye doctor 11 times. Well, I almost lost my right eye. Sal knows about that. I still can't see at night, really, out of my right eye. So, I mean, it is, but admittedly, I put myself into that. I did. It was painful. I could smell it burning. Then they deemed it wasn't even, it should have been a felony. Someone deemed it wasn't. And then I recognized, I would go with security, but it was getting increasingly dangerous. People around me were getting hit. We started wearing vests, and then somebody came up behind me and I could feel it, but they had a box cutter and they went right down my back. So I was wearing a hoodie sweatshirt that zipped, sliced shirt was like the only reason they didn't cut my back is because I had a vest on. Otherwise, they would have sliced me and cut me right in the back. One of the guys I was with, he didn't have the vest or whatever, they cut him. After that, I felt, let me just finish the thought here. Did I have the legal right to do 100%? Yes. Yes, I had the legal right. I had a right to be there, blah, blah, blah. I made the decision like this is insanity because they view it as a free get out of jail free card. They view it, the protesters, that anything goes. Can't do anything to us. First Amendment, blah, blah, blah. I have a right. We deal with people like that, let alone that they're nuts. So I am biased. I am definitely biased. People, you're biased. I am biased. You go through that. I remember talking to Commander Tom Verdi. We were both talking about how terrifying it was. I'll tell you what's not terrifying. Kids Club on the Pike. They're tremendous. They have options for daycare. Call them, 401-443-5336. Kids Club on the Pike. They're right on the Cranston-Johnston line off 295, but they have other locations. If you're looking for some options for daycare, Kids Club on the Pike, 401-443-5336. Again, they also do preschool and before and after school care. It's Kids Club on the Pike. No, it's terrible what happened. And I believe that Tom Holman is going to take control of this situation. And I think they need to tone things down. And otherwise, it's going to derail everything. You can't get anything done when everything is revolving around this chaos in Minneapolis. It is. And it's not fair to the rest of the country. It's not fair to us. This thing has to, I think that Tom Holman will calm the waters. I do. Now, if you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2:00 news. Now, everyone else, we may be live later. That's right. Thank you, Joe Rowe. Yes. I do have an update. I didn't know that. I had no idea. That's interesting. John Laughlin is supporting the thugs over law enforcement. I don't know what thugs are we talking about? I don't know does that mean the protesters? I have not seen or heard that. He has the right. I think It was very scary. Yeah, the man with the cane. That's right, Susan. I'm not going through that again. Yes, it was. I also yeah, what's the matter with you? Where is Bill been? My star sender. We've missed you. Um, folks, I wanna we'll just go a little overtime here since we have everyone and we have signed off on the radio. I think he should go to prison. Let me address this. Which he did, which is legal, helping a woman being pushed, a normal manly instinct. That is ridiculous. That's not a defense, by the way. Natalie Gatta, that is completely false. I'll show it to you. It's not my word. See that? Federal agents. It's a crime. You cannot put your hand on a federal agent. It's a felony. See that? Do you think hey, Natalie, will that hold up in court? That it's a normal manly instinct. So, Natalie, let me ask you, I'm not going to dismiss it. So, if someone's fighting with police, you have the right to inject yourself and get in the middle of that. Does that sound like a wise decision, Natalie? So true, says Cindy. That is ridiculous. He was helping her up. And as he was helping her up, he decided that he was going to put himself and put his arm on the federal agent. I don't know how else to explain it. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Sue. See, none of this stuff holds up in court. I'm just seeing some of the comments now. Cindy, it's not happening as they're going to get the people they're looking for. This is going on. Yes, he did actually act violently. The whole thing is just a nightmare. He did inject himself. Yep. Bill is exactly right on that. He wasn't walking away. What? See, now I'm seeing some of this nonsense. They wouldn't let him walk away. He injected himself, Natalie. Oh my God. So that's the new defense. So he's a hero. Ridiculous. Doesn't hold up in court. The guy's definitely not an attorney. They shouldn't have a weapon, but he's allowed to have a weapon. Yeah, because that makes sense. Now, let me also just say that is completely no one is reading the federal code I'm posting. Why? No one is reading. Why is that? Why is no one reading it? Putting your hands on a federal agent is a serious offense that falls under federal law. Why isn't anyone? Why? How come no one's reading that? All right, Joanne, why is that? How come no one's reading it? A Facebook post. That's not protesting. That's not a protester. Who is he? Here's the several things you guys also should know. And that is that most of ICE, they're either former military or former police officers. This is, yes, that's right. That is completely ludicrous. You're talking about former police and former military. What were they doing there? Of course not. That's what do you mean the right? He doesn't have the right to put his hand on a federal agent. I've already gone through this. I thought I'd stay a little bit extra, but it's all just like the rehash. I don't know why no one's reading the federal law. It is a federal law. See, it's a lot of misinformation. As I have stated, this business of the right, you don't have the right to do that. They don't have the right to kill him. I liked one of the best things I heard after the first shooting was a law enforcement discussion where someone said that they've seen a jaywalking Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they don't want to because they don't know how to. A lot of the people just regurgitate the propaganda and the talking points that they're given. But it was a comment on Fox where someone said, "I've seen a jaywalking situation get out of hand." There's many times where there's a traffic stop and the person just starts. It turns into something very, very different. All right, listen, everybody, have fun in the snow. Thank you for tuning in, and let's hope that they tone things down in Minneapolis.